IBP Demand Planning Release Demand. This video covers 1.4 release demand, where the consensus demand is automatically updated and exported out of IBP DP. There is very little user intervention to these processes, if any, but it is critical to understand how and when this data is created. High level. Release demand, ad hoc release demand, copy consensus demand, copy versions, manage lags, forecast error, calculate XYZ segments. Release demand. This process takes the consensus demand quantity from the previous process and makes automatic adjustments before exporting the value to downstream IBP modules and/or external systems. This is a 100% automated process that occurs weekly. Ad hoc release demand. If the consensus demand needs to be released in the middle of the week, then the demand planner has the ability to send a subset of the data intra-week with this process. Once the user runs an operator to select the data to be transferred, this process is automated and daily. Copy consensus demand. In order to produce some alerts, it is necessary to take a copy of a few key figures every week for comparison purposes. This is a 100% automated weekly process. Copy versions. For the demand planning process, there are several complete copies of the baseline data that occur weekly and monthly. Manage lags. Snapshots of critical key figures are taken weekly and monthly. Be aware that lags are in weeks, so lag 3 means that this is what the key figure looked like 3 weeks ago. There are also snapshots taken on the first of every month, but those are stored in additional key figures. For example, consensus demand May. This is a completely automated process that occurs weekly and monthly. Due to complexity, this process is discussed in its own video. Forecast error. This process compares a lagged key figure to another key figure, typically the sales order history quantity, to determine the overall error. Due to complexity, this process is discussed in its own video. Calculate XYZ segments. In order to determine if a product combination is statistically forecastable, IBP will calculate an XYZ segment for each product. The calculation may use the coefficient of variance of the adjusted sales order history quantity, how erratic the value is, or it may use the forecast error. Due to complexity, this process is discussed in its own video. Details. Release demand. IBP will automatically set the consensus demand quantity export to 0 if the product location status equals 50 and the product location status date is less than or equal to the demand date. IBP will also automatically set the consensus demand quantity export to 0 if the product location status equals 99, regardless of the dates. IBP will automatically set the consensus demand quantity export to 0 if the kill consensus key figure is not empty. Alert, consensus demand quantity doesn't equal export. Fires when the consensus demand quantity does not equal the export quantity. Ad hoc release demand. A demand planner will use the copy consensus to ad hoc in order to stage specific planning objects for an ad hoc copy. IBP will use the consensus demand quantity export key figure to populate a consensus demand quantity ad hoc key figure. A daily scheduled job will export this ad hoc key figure from IBP and also delete the ad hoc key figure after processing. Copy consensus demand. At the beginning of the month, IBP will copy the consensus demand quantity and statistical forecast quantity into last key figures. Alert current divided by last consensus demand quantity fires when the percentage is outside the planner controlled threshold. Alert current versus last statistical forecast quantity fires when the percentage is outside the planner controlled threshold. At the end of the week, IBP will copy the consensus demand quantity export to the IO forecast key figure used by IBP IO. Copy versions. At the end of the week, the baseline version will copy all master and transactional data into a last week version. At the beginning of the month, the baseline version will copy all master and transactional data into a last month version. Thanks for checking out Practical IBP on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the latest videos. You can click on any of the surrounding videos to learn more.